Okay, we had 4 different classes that we wanted to instantiate. Microsoft, XNA framework, and inside the nested namespace content, there is one that is called Content Manager. This one we will instantiate into the one we call the variable we called content. We will also go to the graphics namespace and we'll get a sprite batch, which we will call sprite batch. We also need to go to the graphics again, and in graphics you have texture 2D, which we will call my texture. And the last one we wanted was the vector2 class, or actually not a class, a structure, which we will call sprite position, if I can spell. Okay. I'll show you a little trick. Instead of using that plus sign over there, I can just never leave the keyboard with my hands. I go down to main methods, hold down Control, and press M twice to open that up. In the constructor, we will need to actually pack up a content manager into the content variable. We just declared up here, we just declared allocated space for them in memory. So here we will actually pack them up in memory. The content variable is declared in this object, and it's named content. And we use the assignment operator and the new keyword. And as you can see, IntelliSense suggests a content manager, and that sounds great to me. So I'm going to press enter. And this one will also need some arguments. As you can see, it wants a service provider as an argument. Well, what is this? I'm not going to go into what it is now. I'm just going to show you where you can find it. The game base class actually has defined a service provider for us. So we can just use this keyword again. And if I click on S, you can see that you have services there. So I'll close this up, and we should be happy with that. This content manager that we packed up is the one that deals with the content pipeline. I'm sure you have heard of that one before. We also should pack up a vector and put in the sprite position. So I'll do this, sprite position, new, and it suggests a vector which we can pass several different kinds of parameters. If I go with the mouse here, you can see I can send either I don't send anything, I send a single float value which initializes both the x and y to the same, or I can send separate x and y coordinates. I'll show you how to do this by yourself later on, that you can pass in different kinds of parameters to a method. But for now, it's just know that it's called overloading a method, and we'll pass in floats here. So how do you define a float? If you want to hard code it, you remember the F at the end. Let's move it in a bit from the side of the screen, like that, and we should be happy with that position. Now remember that the vector2 is a structure, it's not a class. As I said, it's like a class, but not 100% the same. For now, all you need to know is that a structure is like a class, but it is more like a normal variable than a class. It doesn't actually contain that much code. It mostly just stores data, which means that since this one will this constructor will pack up classes into objects, we could take this one and put it in initialize instead. So maybe we should do that. It doesn't much matter at this stage. It works in both places, and later on we won't even have these statements in the engine class. We'll move them to another class later on. We need to add an image as well, so I'll get back the Solution Explorer. It's probably good to sort resources into, I'll do this one, new folder, into different folders. So let's call this one resources, and then we can, inside resources, add another folder for textures. Now inside the textures folder, I will add can you see now an existing item? Now on my desktop I have a folder called art, and in this one you can choose the content pipeline files so we can see them. Here I have a box that I threw together, so I'll add that one. Now there's one more trick. Right now you are having the box file, it has been moved so that it's inside our project folder, but it is not inside the folder where the executable file will be put when we compile this. So if I right click on that and choose properties, then you can see two things. If I click on box, there it is. It didn't fit on screen. You see here, copy to output directory. If I set that one to either copy always or copy if newer, that means that the box.png will be copied from this folder to the folder where the executable file is. The second thing you should note is that the asset name is box. We're going to use that in a moment. We're done with properties and we're done with the Solution Explorer, so we can go back to the code for now. I'll scroll down to load graphics content. Here we have it. We will replace the method that is in the base class. We'll make our own because there's nothing much going on in the base class anyway. So I'll delete that and we'll start over. Remember that parameter? Well, this one will be set to true if we have lost the device and we need to reload everything. Or, of course, it will be set to true when we start up the game as well. Otherwise, it will only load some of the content which it will need to load if XNA decides to call this method. So we need to check if this one is set to true. So we'll do the if. Actually, we can do if, and then I click tab because we can use that code snippet. I'll click tab twice or press tab twice. If whatever is in here evaluates to true, then we will load some textures. And if we just pass in load all content, that one will be true if we need to do this. So what should we do? Well, we should assign something to my texture, which is a variable or a field that is part of this object. My texture is there. we'll assign something to it. Now remember that we had on this object, we also had the content manager object that we packed up into content. Remember that that one had a method called load, which we can use. Maybe you can see this, these pointy brackets. I'll show you what they are in a moment. I'll start with load, and then I'll click enter there. Now this pointy bracket will define what kind of data type it is that we will pass in as a parameter. Normally the method load itself in whatever file that Microsoft has put it will specify what kind of parameter data type it wants. But this method is special. It will accept many kinds instead of like load graphics only accepts a boolean. Load will accept many different data types. So we need to specify what kind of data type the parameter should be. And a good idea is Microsoft XNA framework graphics texture, right? Because that's what we want to put in there. After we have specified this, now we can do the parentheses as normal, and we can put the string which is the asset name, and it needs to be relative to the root directory. And the asset name was, if I remember correctly, it was box, right? So if we hard code this, we need to have a quotation mark, and we put it in resources. We had a subfolder called textures. Oops. And then we had the asset name, which was box, right? And that should be fine. The load method will take care of loading everything from the hard disk, and the assignment operator will move it to memory for us. There is one problem though. This will not work. By default, when you hard code a string literal, you cannot, well, you can put in a quotation mark in the middle, like this, so that the actual string used is this part, not the end quotation marks. You can put in a quotation mark in the middle if you precede it by a slash. So for example, let's remove all of this. I'll just format it nicely and then remove this. For example, if you want to, you can do like this, Joey, for example. Now you can see that both of these slashes are these quotation marks are preceded by slashes, which means that the quotation marks will be included so that it actually contains something that looks like that. But we don't want to do this. We don't want to escape anything. We want to use the slashes as they are. And there are two ways to do this. You can escape a slash by adding a slash to it, which is kind of ugly. There is another way that I think is more beautiful, and that is to put an @ sign before. This means, the @ sign means that whatever is inside the quotation marks will not be formatted in any way. It will be just taken as is and passed on, which is great because we want to have the path as it is. This concept is not important. We'll touch on it a few times more, but it's just one of those little tricks that are nice to know. After we have loaded something to the texture variable, we need to load something to the sprite batch as well. So I'll go to sprite batch, and we'll do an equal sign again, and we'll assign something new here. I'll click enter. Why am I not instantiating this in the constructor? Well, if we lose graphics memory, we will lose the sprite batch as well. How would you know this? How would you know that you lose the sprite batch? It doesn't really say that anywhere. Well, one good rule of thumb is that if you have an object which requires as a parameter when you create it the graphics device, then it will be passed to the graphics card, which means you might lose it. So if you pass in graphics device, put it in load graphics content. If you don't pass in graphics device, then you probably don't need to put it in load graphics content. It doesn't always work this way, but most of the time it does. It's a good rule of thumb. Okay, what was it that it wanted? I'll hold down Control and click K and P, and then I get the parameter suggestion back. It wants a graphics device, and we packed up that in a variable called graphics. So I'll just use that. This graphics, and inside that one we should have the graphics, see if we can find it, graphics device. There it is. Then I'll close this up and finish the statement. Now if you really want to be sticky, you could do like this, but it's not really necessary. Just thought I'd show you that. Okay. Let's quickly do the same thing for the unload. So I'll do if tab unload. There it is. Enter. If we need to unload everything, I'm not gonna do anything fancy here. I'll just use that content instead of load, we should use unload, right? And this one is nice because it doesn't want any parameters. So that was pretty smooth. This one we won't touch for a long time, but we will muck about a lot with the load graphics content to make sure that people don't lose anything in the middle of their game. Now we have loaded everything. Now we have one more thing to do, and that is down here in the draw method. We need to actually draw everything. Let's do it here. Between clearing the screen and letting XNA draw everything, we set up what we want to draw. And you remember that we had the sprite batch to actually do the drawing for us. And it had three methods. It had begin, draw, and end. So we start with begin. And this one also wants to know something. It wants to know, how about we do that one? It wants to know the blend mode, which is what kind of style should it blend with. There are a few different kind of ways to paste graphics in. If you don't want any transparency, you can define that here. We do want transparency, so we will define that. I'll go to Microsoft, and then it suggests XNA Framework Graphics Sprite Blend Mode. Sounds great. So I'll click period, and here you can see I can choose additive, which will add to the color of whatever is underneath. This is good for lights. and I can use alpha blend, which means that they will be transparent, or I can use none, which means they will not be transparent. Transparency sounds good. Our box is square, so it doesn't really need to be transparent, but that might change. We might make balls or something else later on. So I'll close this up. Begin, set everything up, and then we had this sprite batch draw. And the draw method was the one that collected all the information about what to draw. So as you can see, well, first of all, there are 7 different kinds of overloaded versions of this one. We can pass in 7 different kinds of things here. In the end, we're gonna use this one, number 7, because this one passes in a lot of junk, so we can do almost anything we want with the sprite. But now in the beginning, I think that this one looks better. This one just takes the texture, it takes a vector 2 for the position, and it takes a color for what tint it should have. That looks good. That's not so advanced, and we already have a vector 2 and a texture, so this is going to be smooth. We have this, and then we have my texture, right? The second thing it wants to know is a vector 2, the position, and we had that as well. This sprite position, there it is. And then the last one is a bit tricky. It wants a color to use for tinting, the color channel modulation. This is part of the XNA framework, as most other things. So let's go into the framework and see what we can find. Graphics, and then we have color down there. This is one of those structures as well. We'll talk more about it later. This good thing about the color here is that it has predefined a lot of colors. We saw that before when we used black. And this time we will not use black, we will use white. That means that we will not tint the box anyway, it will just be the default colors of it. So I'll close that up, and the last call to make was to the sprite batch, not sprite position, sprite batch, to end it, right? This one is nice, it doesn't take any parameters at all. And we should be happy with that. I'll click on save all. I'll click on build, and hopefully it will build everything. It says build succeeded. Sounds good to me. So we go to debug and then we start. See if we get a box. There it is. Good. I'll close this window up. I think that's it for this video.